Why in the F is that security guard all up on Sophie Cunningham? And look, I think there is a reason she got up in Sophie's face. And I don't think there was any need to sort of bow up to Sophie like this.
Finally, the Indiana Fever had a playoff moment to celebrate, but the WNBA managed to turn happiness into controversy. After their significant victory, Sophie Cunningham, wearing a leg brace, simply wanted to support her colleagues. Rather, a league security guard chose to act heroically by yelling at her in the middle of the celebration. The fans weren't pleased. Do you believe Sophie being singled out by the WNBA on purpose because she doesn't match their narrative? Leave your comments below. The scene was prepared. With one of their biggest victories in recent memory, the Indiana Fever advanced in the playoffs without the injured Caitlin Clark. The atmosphere in the crowd was electrifying. Sophie Cunningham, who has been battling her own injuries, sat on the bench to cheer her squad while the teammates celebrated. Just a streetwear player clapping for her teammates, nothing offensive or inappropriate.
Sims hit the floor very hard during the game last night, and her teammates came out to the floor to check on her, except, of course, the girls on the bench, Caitlin Clark, Chloe Bibby, Sophie Cunningham, they came to half court. Did not cross the line, by the way. But for whatever reason, we had a situation involving Paula Blart, Mall Cop. That's right, played this time in the role by Wheezy from Jefferson. The Jeffersons, showed up last night to try to check Sophie Cunningham. Did she think Sophie Cunningham was about to run out there cause an incident? Sophie Cunningham's in a damn leg contraption. It's not even a brace, it's like a contraption.
However, it seems it was sufficient to trigger Rent-A-Cop, the WNBA's very own. The league security detail appeared out of nowhere and confronted Sophie, acting as though she had just broken onto the court or started a riot. To be clear, Sophie wasn't even present at the scorer's table in this instance, much less on the floor. She was cheering and not breaking any regulations close to half court. However, in typical WNBA form, the story was told through the pictures.
Odyssey was holding her right shoulder.
Sophie's expression showed it. Bewilderment, followed by incredulity, and then that signature Cunningham scowl. To be honest, who is to blame for her? She is actually wearing a brace for her legs. She won't be running to the ground anytime soon, but the officer chose to act aggressively rather than professionally, pushing in on Sophie and yelling at her as if she were causing trouble. The video went viral right away because it revealed the strange double standard that has followed Sophie throughout her career, not because she did anything wrong. The fans were furious. Social media exploded in a matter of minutes. Nobody was discussing Lexi Hull's game-changing plays or the Fever's victory. They were discussing how Sophie Cunningham was handled like a criminal despite being hurt and cheered. The outcry was immediate and, to be honest, well-founded. The problem is that this isn't a singular occurrence. It is a component of a pattern. Consider how Sophie has been covered in comparison to other WNBA players. She is confident, loud, and unashamedly herself.
And I think we all know that if there's one thing that male sports fans want to see in their spaces and on their screens, it's more.
She is also among the few athletes who publicly questions the league's accepted storylines. And as a result, she has been singled out by competing fan bases and some media sources. The fact that Sophie Cunningham has been dubbed the WNBA's villain is well known. However, it goes too far when the league's own employees begin treating her like one during a playoff victory. Let's take a reasonable approach to this. The semifinals were reached by the Fever. From the sidelines, Sophie Cunningham, Chloe Bibby, and Caitlin Clark, the players on the bench, are all having a good time. When a player is hurt, none of them go over the line onto the court. They are merely standing close to the midcourt, responding as other teams do during crucial situations. However, Sophie is the only one who is confronted. Caitlin was yelled at, but why? Chloe was the number. Simply put, Sophie. Fans saw this right away. People were pointing out the double standard in the YouTube and Twitter comment sections. Some people were direct about it. Because Sophie is blonde, Caucasian, and doesn't suit the league's ideal plots, she is singled out. The hypocrisy was brought to light by others. The league would have portrayed Angel Reese and Natasha Cloud as fervent, encouraging teammates if they had been in the same circumstance. Sophie, on the other hand, is called entitled and unruly. The irony here is that Sophie didn't even have a negative reaction. She made it apparent that she would not be intimidated, refused to back down, and stood her ground. However, it was evident that the entire situation was superfluous. The police officer wasn't keeping the peace. She was causing a commotion, and fans' frustration erupted when they saw that. There is more to this than a single encounter. It concerns the league's persistent issue with how it treats players who don't match the mold. This has been a problem for Caitlin Clark for the past 2 seasons. Hard fouls that go uncalled, persistent targeting on the floor, and media narratives that attempt to minimize her effect. And Sophie, who has often proved divisive, becomes entangled in the same web. The WNBA is intent on discrediting her rather than celebrating her fame. Here, it's important to remember the numbers. Whether WNBA executives like it or not, Sophie Cunningham is one of the league's most well-liked players. Her participation raises the profile of the Fever, she consistently trends, and her highlights receive clicks. Fans care about her even when she isn't playing, and in a league that is in dire need of recognition and expansion, that should be significant. However, rather than taking advantage of that, the league permits incidents like this one, in which Sophie is publicly humiliated by a police officer at a playoff party. Let's now discuss the fan response, which was quite harsh. Within minutes of the video's release, trending hashtags included Free Sophie and WNBA Exposed. The league came under fire from fans for selective enforcement and for attempting to quiet players who didn't fit the mold. Some even likened it to previous scandals, such as when Caitlin Clark's hard fouls were dismissed as a normal part of the game or when fans were wrongfully accused of racism for jeering at Angel Reese. To be honest, the remarks weren't nice and shouldn't have been. The security guard was being referred to as everything from the WNBA's newest clown act to a power-hungry mall cop. And even though that may come across as harsh, it illustrates how frustrated fans are. Despite their desire to appreciate basketball, they are compelled to observe while league officials fabricate drama. And that's the main problem here. The WNBA enjoys discussing their progress, ratings, and how they are now being given due consideration. However, something similar occurs each time they are given a moment in the spotlight. The narrative shifts from focusing on the Fever to Sophie Cunningham being yelled at by a police officer. It's self-defeating, not just poor optics. This league's public relations issue keeps getting worse. When supporters shout for their favorite players, they don't want to see them treated like criminals. In addition to not wanting to be told that everything is great when their eyes tell them differently, they don't want to witness ongoing double standards. This is the worst part. This wasn't even a furious altercation or a moment of mayhem. This was a festive occasion. Wholesome, pure playoff bliss. What chance does the WNBA have of getting casual viewers to care about the product if it can't even allow its players to enjoy that without making it a contentious issue? Since this crisis did not simply go away overnight, let's move on to the consequences. As supporters began learning more and saw how unfair Sophie's treatment was, it actually gained even more traction. Online videos showed Chloe BB and Caitlin Clark cheering simultaneously. Both were standing nearly shoulder to shoulder with Sophie in the middle of the court, grinning and clapping. However, neither was confronted. No policemen approached Caitlin. Sophie was the only one who barked at Chloe. At that point, supporters began to piece together the story. This has nothing to do with following the law. It had to do with communicating a message. This is where things start to become pretty interesting. Sophie Cunningham isn't your average athlete. She is feisty, loud, and unconformist. She has become a target in a league that seems to be allergic to honest characters because she isn't scared to speak things out. She is not one of the media's favorite page bukers. Angel Reese isn't the league-approved angel. She also doesn't hesitate to question authority. She is divisive as a result of that combination. However, it has also helped her gain popularity. By the way, the WNBA is in dire need of popularity. However, the league seems to go out of its way to minimize her rather than embrace her as a draw. Examine the advertising. In comparison to players half her size, how frequently do you see Sophie in WNBA promotions? Seldom. Examine the league's response to her related controversies in comparison to others. Sophie is portrayed as the bad guy when she fights with a rival. When someone else does, their passion is praised. It's hilariously obvious in addition to being unfair. And the cop encounter just made the situation worse. When fans witness Sophie being singled out in public, they refuse to accept the justifications. They asked a ton of questions on social media. Sophie, why? Why now? Why was a player with leg bracing who couldn't even run 5 feet suddenly considered a security risk? Was it all illogical? Unless, of course, you acknowledge that Sophie Cunningham is the target, which is an uncomfortable reality. Let's zoom out now. What does this signify for the entire league? Because events like this have an impact on how the WNBA as a whole is seen, not just Sophie. Many of the fans, who are mostly casual viewers drawn in by Caitlin Clark's fame, are paying close attention. Even though they were already dubious about women's basketball, these viewers went in because Caitlin and the Fever made it interesting. However, they don't perceive professionalism when Sophie Cunningham is yelled at for cheering. They observe petty behavior. They perceive a league that values drama over basketball. That is problematic as perception is crucial. You can discuss growth. TV ratings are up for debate. You deserve a pat on the back for becoming popular on Twitter. However, none of that matters if supporters leave believing your league is a farce. And it's precisely because of incidents like this that the WNBA is still not taken seriously by many people. Not due to the player's skill or abilities, but rather to the bullshit that surrounds the product. And supporters gave it to the league. Thousands of individuals left comments criticizing Commissioner Kathy Angelbert for overseeing what they described as the most embarrassing sports league. Some even went so far as to demand her resignation, claiming that the WNBA had become a circus act under her direction. Growth is not occurring when people are more interested in your off-court disputes than in your on-court offerings. Failure is what that is. Sophie, meantime, managed the circumstance expertly. She refrained from publicly lashing out and from exaggerating the situation. She didn't give up, though. Her nonverbal cues were very clear. I won't be intimidated by you. Fans appreciated that. They rallied around her, showing their support on social media and reminding her that she has one of the league's largest fan following. Actually, the league would realize that Sophie's popularity isn't going anywhere if they were astute. Her base gets stronger each time she is targeted. Support from her admirers increases each time she is treated disrespectfully. However, the WNBA hasn't exactly established a reputation for being astute when it comes to managing athletes. Let's face it. Examine their treatment of Caitlin Clark. She endured 2 seasons of being battered on the floor, fouled more frequently than anyone else, and hardly shielded by the umpires. Take a look at how they handled Lexi Hull following her heroics throughout the playoffs. The league media seldom ever mentions it. Sophie then yelled at them to stop celebrating. Fans are making connections between the dots in this design. The league aspires to promote the notion that everyone is responsible for their growth. In actuality, however, they are expanding due to a select group of players who make a significant impact. Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, Caitlin Clark, and yes, Sophie Cunningham. That's the truth. Whether they acknowledge it or not, the other teams in the league gain from those names. However, the league chooses its favorites and penalizes the others rather than treating them all equally. It's a short-sighted approach that will inevitably backfire, because this is what will occur. Supporters aren't dumb. They observe the disparity in treatment. The hypocrisy is evident to them. They will ultimately stop paying attention. They will no longer back a league that views its own players as adversaries. And they won't be saved by all the TV contracts and sponsorships in the world when that occurs. The Fever's postseason success gave the WNBA an opportunity to celebrate. Rather, they allowed Sophie Cunningham's attack by a security officer to take center stage. They got the opportunity to showcase Aaliyah Boston's strength, Lexi Hull's bravery, and the team's tenacity in the absence of Caitlin Clark. Rather, police antics are being discussed by fans. That is self-destructive in addition to being embarrassing. Ultimately, Sophie's transgression was her concern for her team. That's all. She was greeted as a threat because she was cheering while wearing a leg brace. I'm not sure what else would tell you about the WNBA's treatment of players who don't fit its template if that didn't. And this one isn't going away, fans. There is still a lot of outrage. It's expanding. Every meme, video, and tweet just serves to increase the level of annoyance. The public has already made up their minds, regardless of how the WNBA tries to spin it. The league appears to be acting petty once more after Sophie Cunningham was wronged. So here we are, another night where the WNBA's ridiculousness, rather than the Fever's victory, is the narrative. The fans are incensed. Sophie refused to back down, and the league once more felt ashamed. What are your thoughts? Was Sophie specifically singled out, or was this a rule issue? Leave a comment below. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more unfiltered sports content.